I'm John Batchelor. Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend, and we're very pleased to welcome Avik Roy, who has posted at Forbes.com a spectacular analysis of the Affordable Care Act right now, close enough to the midterm elections so that all candidates and their campaign-designed operatives can use Avik's very clear 3 points about the Affordable Care Act and shape a message for their states. Avik, I know you didn't write this with that intention, but Mr. Kudlow has been commenting recently on his show and on this show that the Republicans need a platform, something to vote for. And certainly this analysis of the Affordable Care Act is not about personalities or about the voting passions of the Democrats in 2010. It's about where we are right now. And let's begin with number one, largest tax increase in history. Good evening to you, Avik.
Good evening to you, John. How are you? Yes, it depends on how you measure it, right? In dollar terms, in nominal dollar terms, Obamacare was the largest tax increase in U.S. history. If you adjust for inflation or GDP or things like that, you can make a case that it's maybe the fifth or sixth largest tax increase in modern history. But the point is, it's a big tax increase, and that has obvious effects on economic growth, especially the parts of the tax increase that affect small businesses and businesses that file their taxes as individuals for tax purposes.
But cap gains, dividends, all the stuff that you want to help, they're hurting.
That's exactly right. And, I think, Larry, obviously you're one of the most articulate spokesmen in the world on this topic, but for a lot of people, they just don't understand that if you tax capital gains and dividends, what a drag that is on the economy, because what you're doing is taking away productive capital from growing businesses.
And when you add in state taxes, which are becoming a problem in big states, big blue states like California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, etc., Connecticut. You add that in. You stick Obamacare's tax hike on top of that. You really are stifling economic growth.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, obviously, it's hard to disaggregate how much of the slow recovery that we are experiencing is due to Obamacare versus all the other things that the Obama administration is doing, but there can be little doubt that it's having some effect. And to your point, John, in the beginning, what I've done here is I've really kind of, and actually we on the Kudlow show, the Kudlow Report a few months back, we talked about this. The three big drivers of how Obamacare is acting as a drag on the economy are: one, the tax increases; two, the employer mandate and other factors in Obamacare that increase the cost of hiring and employing people; and three, the fact that Obamacare actually subsidizes people to drop out of encourages people to drop out of the workforce.
Let's talk about two. Cost of employing workers. I think I saw the stat in the Wall Street Journal that that workplaces are very slow to hire these days, an average of 25 days, which is very high when you need somebody to fill that post. You're stretching, you're asking for more productivity, you're cutting costs. Is that something we can say is anxiety about the Affordable Care Act? It hasn't been here very long.
Well, I think, John, when you were talking in the break about some of the people that you've spoken to who speak to small businesses as a beat from a journalistic standpoint, I can tell you when I talk to small businesses, they're doing everything they can to increase the degree that they're using technology to replace humans. So, for example, I read about this in the Post, the fact that grocery stores are using self-service checkout counters where you scan your own groceries. That's not limited to grocery stores. That's limited to that's expanding to a lot of different types of small businesses, and that means obviously less jobs for humans.
Oh, another key point, though, which you mentioned in your piece, which is the Casey Mulligan point from Chicago University. This bill, this Obamacare, essentially pays people not to work. Can you walk through that?
Yeah, so I'll take you through Casey Mulligan's argument, and I'll give a counterpoint that I think is important. The Casey Mulligan argument. So Casey Mulligan is a well-known and accomplished economist at the University of Chicago, and he's been really the guy who's done the most research on this topic, which is the fact that, look, the subsidies in Obamacare are designed for low-income people who can't afford health insurance at its current prices. So what does that mean? You're typically low income in America if you either don't have a job or you have a part-time job. If you have a full-time job, you're making enough typically that you can afford health insurance, or your employer is offering you health insurance. So Casey Mulligan's argument is that if you give people that subsidy for health insurance, independent of whether they're working or not, then what's going to happen? A lot of people who work to maintain their health coverage are going to drop out of the workforce. That makes perfect sense. And in fact, the Congressional Budget Office has estimated that 2.5 million Americans will drop out of the workforce largely due to that point. Now, the counterpoint that I would make to that is that in Switzerland, where they have universal coverage and they have means-tested subsidies for health insurance, the unemployment rate is 2.9%. So the point really is, it's not so much that health care is driving this issue or subsidized health care is driving this issue. It's the totality of the welfare state in America at the federal and state level that cumulatively is disincentivizing people to stay in the workforce.
See, that's right. We have a much bigger, more widespread welfare state than Switzerland. And so if you go back to work, or if you get a low-pay job, Avik, and then you succeed, let's say you work and you succeed, you're not only going to lose Obamacare subsidies, you're probably going to go into a higher tax rate. And so it just isn't worth it.
That's
exactly
right.
A continuous poverty trap.
One thing that a lot of European countries do that we ought to look at in this country is they actually treat welfare benefits as income. So, for example, if you live in Sweden and you get a welfare benefit, that welfare benefit is subject to income taxes. And that may seem like a strange concept for us, but it's very important, because what does that mean? If the welfare benefit drives you to a higher tax bracket, you pay the higher tax rate. And so in that way, the welfare disincentive of work that we deal with in this country is not as pronounced in Europe, because in many of those European countries, welfare is treated as income.
Avik, another one, just generically. You wrote an earlier piece, which I think should be part of Republican policy dogma, and that is, it's not necessary to totally repeal Obamacare, but you can take it and take these exchanges and make them into true free market health care.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is really important for listeners of your show, John, to understand, and I think it's not well understood, is that America did not have a free market healthcare system before Obamacare. Lyndon Johnson in 1965, when he enacted the Great Society, that was the government takeover of healthcare. Medicare and Medicaid was the government takeover of healthcare, as Ronald Reagan warned us in the early 60s. And so what's Obamacare? It's an addition, it's an incremental addition, actually, to that gigantic government expansion that happened in the 60s. So I think if for those of us who actually want a free market healthcare system, we're really setting our sights too low if we only focus on Obamacare. We've got to tackle Obamacare, Medicare, and Medicaid all at the same time. And if we do that and actually tackle the things about the government intervention in the healthcare system system-wide that make healthcare unaffordable, both for individuals and for the taxpayer, we can actually do a lot to solve our budget deficit problems and solve the unaffordability of health care for average people. So I wrote about this for National Review. The title of the paper is Transcending Obamacare, and I encourage anyone who's interested to look it up.
And Larry, back to your point about the Republican Party without a message for the midterm election. Avik's cogency is overwhelming. Do the Republicans fear Obamacare, Larry?
No, I just think that for some reason, maybe because of some numbers put out about enrollment, they just backed off the thing, and they've gotten distracted, and they're, worrying about impeaching the president or suing the president, and that's just all nonsense. It's a distraction. And Avik's idea, basically, let's just review this again. Use the exchanges.
20 seconds left.
Bring Medicare and Medicaid into it, but give people free choice, give them tax credits or vouchers, and get rid of the mandates. That's all you have to do, and you'd be in great shape, and people would love that.
Avik Roy is the opinion editor at Forbes Healthcare, Fiscal, and Tax Policy, and you can receive the weekly digest of the Forbes coverage of these things. You just sign up for it at Forbes. Larry Kudlow, CNBC, and Kudlow Radio on the Weekend, my colleague and co-host. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm John Batchelor.